What's up, goons? Welcome to another edition of Sports Hop, a show that looks at two independent entities in music and sports and examines how they've influenced each other over the years in a number of different ways. I'm your host, William McLaughlin, aka The Kid, and as always, let's get this bad boy rolling.
Shut up and sit down.
Now, the identity of this show has already been made known if you've already listened to just one or even all of my episodes, 5 so far. But all I do is look at how music and sports, two different entities, have been able to coexist and really make a difference in this world, in society and culture, and see how people view not only music but also sports, and how together, even though separate, they're two great forces all their own. They can completely dominate the world. They can dominate society in a number of different ways. They have so many great ways of bringing people together all their own. But when put together, they really just have this flow and this pattern together that creates a lot of great memories, great feelings. It evokes so much out of a person that it really helps you to understand and have a greater love for both. And if you're someone who leans more towards one end or the other with music or sports, or if you're someone who just doesn't really examine both altogether, it's always nice to look at this and really think about how it's not only influenced just one or two people personally, but has had an entire effect on society. Now, my episodes, I've talked about how rap and basketball or hoops and hip-hop go hand in hand, and how the symmetry, the flow is almost poetic, and that they're the same thing in my mind and in the minds of others. I examined how the Super Bowl itself has become one of the biggest musical spectacles when the halftime show happens. So you're really able to get an idea of how music and sports can play this big influence in people's lives and industries at the professional level all the way down to a local level for teams in high school, junior high, or rec leagues. This episode, though, is something that I was doing a decent amount of research in, and I felt it went perfect, being that this episode is airing on the last day of March 31st. But I wanted to look at the influence of women in music and in sports, seeing as that it is Women's Month for the month of March. Now, as I did my research, I wanted to look at not only just women who were great athletes, but women who were great representatives and ambassadors, not only for the game of whichever sport they played, but also just for society and for women and younger girls in general in life. And I also want to look at how their aspect in music has played a role in society, because it seems that when we historically view sports and music, they're two male-dominated industries from top to bottom, but as years have gone on, we've seen more and more progression for both, which is great, but it still feels like there's a little bit of a gap between the two. So I want to take this episode and really just look back and also preview women who have had a major influence in sports and music in the past and have been those anchors for those that are becoming influences or are the icons now in sports for so many fans, whether it's boys or girls, specifically for girls, though, that are able to help them just break out of their shell and really create a love and have something that they're passionate about when it comes to music and sports. So the first influential woman in sports, and I'm going to start with sports just because it's an area that I'm so familiar with, and it's an area that I'm very passionate about. But the first very influential woman in sports that I looked up to growing up, just from a basketball standpoint, because my dad is a coach, and I've always loved the game of basketball, whether it be collegiate, high school, or professional, but it's Pat Summitt. Pat Summitt was the longtime coach of the Tennessee Lady Volunteers basketball team. She was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease, and the late, great Pat Summitt was someone who a lot of people really looked up to. She was a great ambassador, not only for the game of basketball, but for women in sports and women in basketball specifically. What she did at Tennessee is just phenomenal. She is historically one of the greatest coaches of all time, regardless if it's men or women's. She racked up 1,098 wins and 8 NCAA championships in 40 years at Tennessee. The woman understood the game. She had a love for it, and when it came to not only just the game of basketball, but when she looked at her athletes, she wanted to make sure that these women, when they were done with basketball, if they didn't get a chance to play professionally, that they were set for life when it came to their educational standpoint. So not only was she someone who was big on just winning games and national championships, which she was really good at. She was also somebody who cared for these athletes. She was someone who gave these women a chance to really showcase themselves, not only to the country, but to the world. And after their playing career, she made sure that they were women who went on and had a great education and had something to fall back onto when they were done with their collegiate playing career. Pat Summitt, to me, when you think of the Mount Rushmore of college basketball, she's up there. She's right there with John Wooden, Bob Knight, and you could arguably throw Dean Smith in there as well. But she was one of those women that really was just someone who helped break out in women's sports, especially with Title IX in college athletics. And you look at her the things she did for Tennessee. She's just one of 4 college coaches at the time that has ever reached 1,000 wins, and she's only behind John Wooden in total titles. She retired after the 2011-2012 season, and she served as the head coach emeritus for the Lady Vols. And when she passed away, there was a part of the world that just got a little less brighter, because everyone from the sports world and really just the world in general understood like her influence. She was absent from the bench in the last 2 years of her career, but she had such a big influence in helping women's sports become a big thing at the collegiate level. When you look at NCAA basketball, for the longest time, and it still is a male-dominated sport when it comes to viewership, but she was the one that really helped put college women's basketball on the map. She turned it around and helped people see that female athletes are athletes. There's nothing against that, and that they can play this game, and they're good at it, and she was good at coaching it. And in the long run, long after she's passed, her name in the world of sports, in the history of college sports, specifically in coaching careers, she will stand the test of time. And if you look outside of that, outside of sports and her influence for women in athletics, she's one of those icons, because simply put, she was someone who was very passionate about making sure female athletes in women's college athletics were important and that they were viewed and treated with respect, just like male athletes and male athletics. And it was great. I remember being a kid watching her teams play. She was so great at coaching these teams and bringing together a group of athletes and just making sure that they flowed and worked together. It was poetic. And Pat Summitt, to me, is one of those most influential women in sports. And 20, 30 years down the road, she will still be remembered. She will still be considered one of the greatest coaches of all time, regardless of women's basketball or men's basketball at the collegiate level. She's on my Mount Rushmore of great college coaches in basketball. No questions asked. Now, staying in the realms of college athletics and specifically college basketball for women, there is another woman right now who's a coach, a former Virginia standout that helped put women's basketball on the map, not only as a player at the collegiate, the Olympic, and the professional level in the WNBA, but now as a coach. She's one of those women that when you look at her, you think of someone that is a Pat Summitt type, someone who is very influential on the game today. And she's still a coach. She still does great things for the collegiate program that she leads, but I'm talking about Dawn Staley. Dawn Staley just is one of those women that she had a great career from beginning to end as an athlete, and when that translated into the coaching game, it worked perfectly. And you look at what she's done. She's the head coach at South Carolina, a team that won an NCAA championship a season ago. She's had them in the NCAA tournament for a number of years, but she was one of those women that when it came to being an ambassador now after Pat Summitt's passing, she took it over so well. Staley, again, she was a former Virginia standout. She's a Hall of Fame WNBA player, and she's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. She was a winner as a player, and her 8 seasons at Temple as a head coach, she helped them lead them to 6 NCAA tournament appearances. She's just someone that when she transitioned from athlete to coach, she took on that aura of what Pat Summitt had, and she was a woman that has completely helped turn around college athletics again and making sure that it stays relevant on the women's side. You can't look at women's college basketball now and not think of Dawn Staley, because her passion for the game, her experience, and what she brings to the table. It's helped her not only recruit a lot of great athletes and blue chip talent, but she transformed a hapless team in South Carolina into one of the toughest contenders nationally coming out of the SEC. And in the SEC on the women's side of college basketball, that's a tough conference to come out of. And for her to be doing that just shows how much influence, how much power, and how much respect she garners as a coach. And when I watch her teams play over the last few years, she, even as a coach, someone who's just there on the sidelines, she can generate that passion and that fierceness out of her that it translates onto the floor for her players. And her players, they respect that. And a lot of people who play against her, a lot of people who have watched her coach and have watched her play know that this is someone who knows what she's doing. And for younger girls, younger women in college athletics, high school athletics, or youth athletics, especially basketball, you look at Dawn Staley and you can't help but think like she's someone who continues to be a great ambassador for the game of women's basketball. And she's one right now that in this generation now of technology and society and having so much information in front of you, if you're someone who is interested in looking into college athletics, especially on the women's side, and you think about college basketball, I feel like you can't think about college basketball specifically for the women without thinking first Pat Summitt in the long run because she's just an icon. But today you think Dawn Staley and you think South Carolina basketball because she has been a great ambassador. She's been a great coach. She was a phenomenally great player. I mean, her accolades speak for themselves. But in the realm of women in sports, she is one of those women right now that I feel like without her, it just wouldn't be the same because she brings in that Pat Summitt aura today for people who may not have been ever able to see Pat Summitt coach when she was so dominant at Tennessee in her time. Now, still sticking into the realm of sports, and this one is more of an influence on the media side of sports for people who, women and girls who are interested in following sports, if you want to cover sports, from someone who's worked in journalism and has been a media relations communicator for a long time. This woman here, when I still watch ESPN, when I grew up watching ESPN, this woman was a staple. She was that anchor piece that really helped bring ESPN to life during their time when she was brought in, and that's Linda Cohen. She, again, female sports anchor for ESPN. She was hired back in 1992, and again, she's been a staple ever since. And the reason I bring up Linda Cohen on the sports side is because you look at sports journalism, sports media, and the fact how people cover sports, that's another industry that is very male-dominated. And Linda Cohen, she came in the early 90s, and she made herself known. She made her presence known, and ever since then, when you think of great female analysts, great female sports reporters, she's one of those ones you think of right away because she brings a liveliness and she brings experience and passion and knowledge to the game. And I feel when you are able to watch her, you not only get a sense of like watching sports, but you feel like you're involved. And that's the biggest thing about journalism and sports journalism. You got to make your fans, you got to make the audience feel like they're involved, like they matter when it comes to reviewing sports or just getting them involved in highlights in the game. You want them to feel as if they're part of that game. And Linda Cohen does that. She has been so phenomenal in front of the television, whether it be covering basketball, football, golf, tennis. She has a wide array and a wide vast of knowledge for the game of sports. And when she teamed up with the late Stuart Scott on a number of broadcasts when she was an anchor, those two together, they gelled so well. And she's just one of those women, when you hear her talk, you feel her passion, you feel how she really cares about what she does. And she's not somebody just going through the motion. She's not just going through the flow. She honestly has a general love for sports. And I feel when you're someone who works in sports, whether it's as an athlete, a coach, someone who works on the media side, event management, social media, whatever it is, that's the biggest thing about sports is that you don't go through the motions. You have to have a passion for it. And a lot of men in years past, and when you look at how sports has been a male-dominated industry in media, a lot of men have felt like women don't have that. And Linda Cohen is one of those women that has proven, no, that's not true. Women have just as much knowledge, if not better knowledge. They have great passion. They have a great love for sports, just like men do. And that's why women in sports was something I really wanted to talk about, because you look at the way they've been able to influence the world, and they've made progressive changes. And that's what life is all about, is making progressive changes for the betterment of society and mankind. And women like Linda Cohen, Pat Summitt, Dawn Staley, and other women that I'm going to be mentioning here shortly, there are those women that have been able to really just take on that aura and that task of like making sure women in sports and in music are not just something to be put on the back burner or to be left to the side. No, they are something that is very relevant in both industries, and without them, they probably don't progress, and they probably aren't as fun for fans like myself. And that's why I wanted to involve Linda Cohen, because from the journalistic standpoint, again, came in the early 90s, 1992, and she's been a staple ever since. And for women, younger women and girls that want to work in journalism or in sports media, Linda Cohen, I feel, is just one of those women that when you look at how she's done things and how she's worked her way to the top and become one of the best ESPN anchors, that gives you that motivation. That gives you that excitement to know that although this industry is still male-dominated for the most part, there are women in sports who still continue to make an influence and still continue to be powerhouses, whether it's as an athlete, a coach, or someone who works in media or behind the scenes in whatever department it may be. But Linda Cohen's always been one of my favorite anchors as well on ESPN. She brings a very fun vibe. She has a very upbeat attitude about a number of things. And again, when I would watch her and Stuart Scott work together, it was a match made in heaven. I loved it. They were perfect. And it always made me feel like I could enjoy sports a lot more. Being around my older sister and watching sports with her, she always felt like she could enjoy it a lot more too whenever Linda Cohen was on. So it just, for her on that side, she's just been a great influence and someone who I feel will continue to influence the game of sports from the journalistic standpoint. Okay, switching over to the music side of things and how women are influencing in the realm of in music. Jana Fleischman, is the first name that really popped to my mind, because when I was talking about athletes and music and sports in general in my previous episodes, I brought up Rock Nation, and I talked about how rap or hip hop and basketball are a big influence on each other and are almost the same. And I reference Rock Nation, which is, again, entertainment company founded by rapper Jay-Z in 2008. But the reason I bring it up is because Jana Fleischman has been one of those women that when she stepped into the realm of Rock Nation, she helped launch, the sports management division of that company in 2013. She's been with Rock Nation since 2009. Now, the reason I bring her up as I'm getting to the point is that she has a background in music and entertainment. She worked her way up through Def Jam Records music group, which iconically is one of the greatest hip-hop/rap music businesses when it comes to putting out labels and artists of all time. Like, they're up there. She worked her way through the ranks at Def Jam. And Def Jam, again, sticks out, and she was there for nearly a decade before she switched over to Rock Nation. Now, the reason she's been such a big influence there is because she has a great influence. She's already helped, back in 2014, she helped sign athletes like Hakeem Nicks, a former wide receiver for the Giants, and CeCe Sabathia, a pitcher for the Yankees, to Rock Nation when they started their sports management division and had started getting their clients. And to today, they still have athletes like Kevin Durant, Robinson Cano, Skylar Diggins. They are able to grab those athletes who not only are just great athletes, but people who stick out in pop culture today. And she's been a part of that because she's been able to get into the mix of helping look at these athletes and figure out, okay, how can they not only influence the sports management division of Rock Nation, but also that entertainment side of it. And her background in Def Jam music is what's able to help influence that and help bring in these athletes. Now, it's it's unclear for a lot of people if Rock Nation is more founded in entertainment or if they're trying to stick with sports management. But realistically, it's both. And with her, she's able to help them open up that span and that base not only in music but also in sports, so that they can coexist and really mesh together. Because when we look at, just Kevin Durant in general, the guy is someone who kind of sticks out as a heel in the NBA, as a bad guy, to some, not to all. But when you think of music, when you think of pop culture and athlete name references in music, kind of flashing back to episode 1 in Hoops and Hip Hop, Kevin Durant's one of those names that sticks out. Drake has referenced him a number of times along with a couple of other athletes, but that's why I feel Jana Fleischman has really helped become a big influence in the music and also into the sports area, is because she's not a name that's well known to a lot of people unless you research or know like music and the intertwinings, the inner workings, and the background area of it. But again, someone coming from Def Jam Music Group, that label, and jumping ship over to Rock Nation, she went from being with one of the biggest influential labels of all time in Def Jam to now she is a co-worker and helps run Rock Nation along one of the greatest rappers of all time in Jay-Z. And she's helped them to really branch out and create, again, that sports management division back in 2013. So her influence in music has helped Rock Nation to really expand outward and create larger departments so that they can start targeting and, sponsoring athletes that have an influence in culture when it comes to music and pop culture and society. And that's why I think she's, again, one of those women in sports and our music and sports that has been an influence and continues to be an influence, because Rock Nation is going to be around for a long time, and who knows what's coming. It's only 2018. They continue to be a big influence in athletics and in professional sports. Rock Nation did just sign Shaquan Barkley as his agency company, because Shaquan Barkley is going to be a top 5 draft pick in the NFL, and he went with Rock Nation. So that just goes to show you the kind of power and pull and influence they have when it comes to athletes in the professional level. And again, for her, from her music background and helping expand the realm of sports, I think she's going to continue to do great things for that company. The next woman that I feel is a big influence in sports, because again, it's such a male-dominated industry and has started to branch out towards the entertainment side of sports and music in a sense, is Ronda Rousey. Now, there are mixed emotions for a lot of people about Ronda Rousey, because she had, again, a great MMA career, was one of the better fighters in the UFC before she kind of fell off the map and phased her way out to where now she's with the WWE. But the reason I bring her up as an influential woman in sports is because you look at the brutal sport of MMA and kickboxing and, just the UFC in general, and she was able to break out and really open up the women's division in the UFC. I feel without her, women's kickboxing, women's MMA in the UFC ranks, and just really at the amateur professional and true professional ranks, it's not there without her. She is one of the women that she was a staple in the UFC for a long time. And for a lot of people that say, boxing, UFC, MMA, all that stuff is it's a man's sport, she was one of those women that said, no, it isn't. It is a sport that can be great with women involved. And when she made her amateur debut in 2010, her career skyrocketed after that. She became the first female fighter to sign with the UFC. So that goes to show you how great of an athlete and how great of a fighter she was. She broke the barrier and was the first woman to compete in the UFC. And then she became the first female fighter to headline a UFC event. She started her career at 9-0. 8 of them were submissions and a TKO. And she was the number 1 pound-for-pound female fighter in the world at one point. Now, her influence, again, it goes beyond the octagon, because she's done regular work working as a model. She's had memorable appearances in ESPN's The Magazine when they do the body issue. She was in the 2012 edition. And on top of that, you look at her her role and influence in culture and entertainment is she's also acted. She's been in the Expendables 3 movie. She was in Fast and Furious 7. She was in the Entourage movie playing her role as a fighter, so herself. But that's how much of an influence she was. She became, again, the first woman to fight in the UFC. She helped create more divisions out of the bantamweight. She was a champion for a number of years. And if you look at how popular women's boxing and women's fighting is in the UFC today, none of that exists without her. She was that benchmark. She is that staple. And now she's no longer a UFC fighter. She's with the WWE. She's on a 7-year full-time contract, I believe. Dana White, Joe Rogan, those guys that are big in the UFC have said it's really unclear if she'll ever fight in the UFC again. But if you look at women's fighting in the UFC, it's not there without her. It doesn't exist. It doesn't have the popularity. It doesn't garner the attention that it does today without her. And that's why she's such a big staple in women's sports in general. When you look at sports down the road 20, 30 years, and if you were to break it down by each category, I guarantee you when you look at the women's division of the UFC, you're going to immediately think Ronda Rousey. Even if you're someone who's just kind of followed sports, or if you're someone who just kind of knows UFC and kickboxing, when you think of the women's side of it, the first name that should always come to your mind is Ronda Rousey. If it's not there without her, plain and simple. And you look at her now in the WWE, she takes on the persona of Rowdy Ronda Rousey. She was a big WWE fan growing up. Her favorite wrestler was Rowdy Roddy Piper, who was one of the greatest wrestlers in WWE history. And to show you the kind of respect she's gained from that era and that area of entertainment sports, the leather jacket that she wears out on WWE on Monday Night Raw, the leather jacket she has is the original Rowdy Roddy Piper jacket. His son gave that to her as a gift because they respected her so much. So in the realm of entertainment sports, she's already starting to make an influence. She's going to be headlining WrestleMania, or not headlining, but she's got one of the matches in WrestleMania. And a lot of people that argue, WWE, it's all fake and it doesn't matter, whatever. That's your own opinion. You're allowed to have your own wrong opinion. But that's how much of an influence she is, that now that she's in the WWE, there are more fans that are going to start to gravitate toward that because of her. Now, the WWE itself stands alone as one of the greatest entertainment sports entities in the world, and it is a sport in my mind. She's going to help make that even more popular. It's a big entity now, but with her there, her involved, and as she starts to work through, she's going to bring in more fans. I already bought a t-shirt. I love it. It's great. But that's how much of an influence she is. She made women's UFC a thing. It's not relevant without her. And now that she's moved over and translated into the WWE, it's going to start to garner more attention than it already has because she's going to help with that. And she may not do great. She may not have a long career. Who knows? And she may be a heel. She may be the villain for a lot of people. But more and more people are going to gravitate towards the WWE because of her. And that's the kind of influence she has. That's the kind of respect and power she garners as a female athlete in sports today. Now, staying in the realm of the WWE, the next person that I feel like is an influential woman in sports is Stephanie McMahon. And again, like I said, the WWE is looked at as entertainment sports, and there are so many things about the WWE that they do that helps them be so popular, not only just in sports, but in music, culture, with children, toys, and entertainment. There are a number of things that they do that just make them a company and industry that has to be recognized. A lot of people may not respect it. A lot of people probably don't even care about it. But it is a recognized sport. It is a recognized industry because it does so well and it garners so much revenue, fans, support. It's great. But on the women's side of it, Stephanie McMahon, who is the vice chairman, or chairman Vince McMahon's daughter, she's a force in the WWE, and she's really the face of the WWE now. For those of you that watch Monday Night Raw, the pay-per-views, Tuesday Night SmackDown, WWE Network, what have you be, whatever way you follow the WWE, Stephanie McMahon is one of those faces that is constantly there. She started off as an account executive for the WWE in their sales department in 1998, and she's worked her way up the ranks. Now, there are a lot of trolls and a lot of people that argue, say like, oh, she's only there because her dad owns the company. That's beside the point. You look at the background work she has in business and in marketing and entertainment marketing and accounting. She knows this. And there's a reason that she's running the company now pretty much in a sense. And on top of that, her husband is Triple H, who's arguably one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. But she, in her own right, she garners the respect, she garners that attention because she's helping this company so much. The Royal Rumble, for those of you that don't know, is a 30-man match where guys battle each other, a chance to earn a spot at WrestleMania in the main event for the world title. That never existed until, on the women's side, until this past year, and that was because of Stephanie McMahon. They made it the first time ever that they were able to have a women's Royal Rumble. And Stephanie McMahon was a big advocate for that. She was a big advocate for changing the way women were looked at in the WWE. For those of you fans, remember, they used to be called the Divas division for the longest time, and they were more part of the WWE for the sex appeal and drawing in that part of it. But now you look at them and there's more action. They do more wrestling. The dialogue that they have it's a lot better, and it adds to the flow of the WWE. And Stephanie McMahon was one of those big advocates for saying that women in the WWE need to be looked at more as athletes and not these divas or these models that are just kind of like drama queens. No, they're athletes. They can go out, they can perform, they can do a lot of the things the men can do, and they can help bring more to the sport that is wrestling at the professional ranks. And it's great. Someone who loves watching the WWE now, my favorite female wrestler is Charlotte Flair, the daughter of the great Ric Flair, 16-time world champion. And she brings on that very same persona as her father does. But when I look at Charlotte Flair, I don't see her as a model in the ring. I look at her as an athlete who is one of the best in the WWE, regardless if it's a male or a female. She's one of the top 10 best wrestlers right now today at the professional ranks. And again, you don't have that change and that shift for females in the WWE without the help of Stephanie McMahon. She's the face of the whole company, and that's very rare to see where a woman sticks out and is the face for an entire industry because, again, it's such a male-dominated setup. But Stephanie McMahon is that one who's right there. She's the face of the WWE. She's helped make such great changes. Her and her husband, Triple H, again, have really changed how the WWE is looked on the women's side and overall. And it's great because it's gotten a lot more fans from the women's perspective. It's added more to the sport, and it's not just with this one-dimensional setup. And you don't have that without Stephanie McMahon. And the way she's been able to build up and work her way through the ranks at the WWE is impressive. And anybody that says she's only there and is doing that great because of her father, you're lying to yourself. You really are. Now, before I close out the show, those were just some of the few women that I could reference that are icons and athletes, coaches, entities as journalists, marketers, the faces of sports and in music. Again, Ronda Rousey, Pat Summitt, Linda Cohen, Jana Fleischman, and Stephanie McMahon. Those are just some of the few of the many great women in sports and in music today. And without them, you don't see that progress, you don't see that change. And there are more and more industries that are picking up and really trying to push out that, women aren't as tough as the boys, or they don't think that women are athletes or people who can dominate in the industries of music and sports. And that's wrong because they can. And women like McMahon, women like Rousey, Cohen, Pat Summitt, those women have shown that although these industries male-dominated, women can still come in, they can make great changes that influence and bring in more revenue, more fan base, and just more viewership for their industries. And you see it now in other industries in general, like Nike. They do a lot more commercials and a lot more inspirational setups that show like women in sports like are influences they are great women. They're great ambassadors for sports and music. One of the links that I list in the bio and going to show you a video of here shortly is when Always did their hashtag Like a Girl campaign. That campaign was great. They came out in 2016, and it was those things of like where they showed younger girls in athletics, showing that, you know, if when women hit that adolescence age, when girls hit that adolescence age, they quit sports. Half of them do. And Always wanted to put out a campaign, you know, to give them that confidence, to show that you can play with the boys and you can be better than the boys when you work hard enough. And it was a great campaign series. It garnered a lot of respect and attention. But I'm going to show you one of those videos now. And then if you get a chance, just check out the whole campaign itself. Also look at the Nike Why Not Me campaign that they did. It was great. And it really just goes to show you that women and young girls in sports are going to continue to stick around. They're going to continue to be a force of change and progression in society, and it's great. But here's the Always Like a Girl campaign. The one I'm going to show you is called Keep Playing. It's a great one, and if you get a chance, check out the rest of them.
A lot of boys have told me that I can't play rugby because I'm a girl.
Actually, I've had a lot of people come up to me saying, aren't you afraid of getting really massive?
You have to be girly. You have to like certain things.
Il disait que je devais être quelqu'un qui travaille dans un magasin.
What would you say to a girl who's thinking of quitting?
I'd say don't you dare.
I think a girl can play anything that they want to play. Girls could actually play rugby, and they could also be the team captain of the team.
You are worth it, and you deserve to play whatever sport you want to play. So don't let anyone tell you can't do it.
There you have it, folks. Episode 6 of Sports Hop, and this one examining women in sports and music. Something that I feel is overshadowed at times and by a lot of people just ignored, or not something they want to really recognize. But to all the women out there who are big in sports and in music, you make a difference. There's not progression, there isn't change without you involved. And I salute you for that, because I have one older sister who was a great athlete in high school. She loved it, and she continues to enjoy sports to this day. I have two younger nieces who are big into playing sports and doing outdoor activities, and when I look at some of these great women in sports, I feel like they're going to be big influences. And for those of you continue to aspire to be, great athletes, journalists, media workers, or people who work in the music industry, whether it be an artist or someone who works in the background as a lyricist, whatever it is, to the women out there that work in sports and in music, to the young girls aspiring to work in that realm of sports or music, keep fighting, keep that great fight on, because without you, the changes, the progression that we see, and the better influences we see in society don't exist without that. And I thank you for everything and what you have brought to the table, because it's awesome, and it is a big help and a big force in sports and in music. But that is going to wrap up the episode here, goons. Hope you enjoyed. Again, as always, be sure to show me some love on Twitter. Handle is @sports_hop1. And if you want to follow me personally on Twitter, my handle is will_MCL11. Again, once as always, shout out to my man Chris Smith, who really got this show going and helped me with something to run with and just, take it further. But until next time, peace out, goons.